Today's video does contain some subject matter that may be disturbing, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you would like to send a story my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And as always, thank you. Back in the early 90s, when I was about 10 years old, I had a really creepy close encounter with someone that honestly could have ended a lot worse than it did. And if I had been a bit more gullible, it likely would have ended really badly. At the time, I honestly didn't fully comprehend the potential danger of the situation, but as I've gotten older, it clicked pretty hard how unsettling this experience really was. As mentioned, this was back when I was about 10 years old. My parents both worked full-time during the day, and most days when I got home from school, I would be in an empty house for a couple of hours until my mom was able to leave work and get home. They trusted me to be responsible enough to take care of myself. I was the type of kid that liked to just spend time in my room playing my Super Nintendo instead of being a problem for other people. We lived in a neighborhood that was pretty much just a bunch of old people, so it was relatively safe. Honestly, it never seemed like that big of a deal. On this day, I'd been home for maybe half an hour. I'd finished my homework and had turned on the TV to watch something and grabbed a Pop-Tart for a snack, when I thought I saw something outside of the living room window. It was a pretty big window, and it faced to the west, so if you walked by it in the afternoon, it would cause a bit of a shadow in the room. I glanced over for a moment to see if I could see anything. I saw a man, probably in his late 40s. He looked a bit older than my dad. He was slowly walking along the sidewalk in front of our house. He seemed to be studying the house, staring at the ground, the roof, almost like he was seriously trying to memorize how the house looked. Then, it got creepy. As I was watching this guy analyze the exterior of our home, I watched as he put his face up to the glass with his hands cupped around his eyes. He was absolutely looking in the window and trying to see if there was anybody in the house. And, of course, he saw me sitting on the couch just staring at him. He smiled and waved, and then I watched as he walked over to the front door and put his hand on the doorknob, then tried to push the door open. Thankfully, my parents had always told me to keep the door locked at all times, and I was pretty obsessive with doing so he wasn't able to get in. When he realized that he wasn't getting the door open, he walked back to the window and started knocking. By this point, I was having a mini panic attack in my mind, screaming about how this was some weirdo trying to get into the house. But I kept trying to calm down and tell myself that he must have been a neighbor or something. He kept knocking on the window, rapidly, just tapping on it with his knuckle for several moments, and then he started tapping hard on the door. At this point, I had no idea what to do. I walked into the kitchen near the front door and just stood there. Because I was so unsure of what to do, I just figured that I could tell him he's at the wrong house and to go away. I did not open the door, obviously, but I did shout out to him saying, "Who are you and what do you want?" When I asked this, I could hear him laugh a bit and then say, "Could you open the door for me?" I said no, and again asked who he was. He then said that he was a neighbor and he wasn't going to hurt me. I may have been only 10, but I knew that this was a weird thing to say to a kid. You don't just tell a kid, "I'm not going to hurt you," unless you plan to hurt them. At least, not in this kind of scenario. I told him that if he was a neighbor, then he needed to come back later when my parents were home, which I now realize was a stupid thing to say, as this was me literally telling him that my parents were not home. When I said this, he paused for a moment and said, "Look, I work with my mom's name. I'm a friend of hers. She'll vouch for me. Can you please just let me in?" Now, this is where things got a bit confusing for me. This man knew my mother's name specifically, and it's not a common name, so it wasn't like he could just guess a name and get it right. But I also knew my mother's coworkers. My mom worked at a hair salon. She was one of the big names of the store, alongside my aunt. They had about 5 employees that they worked with, and I knew all of them because I would always hang out there during the summer, and I loved all of my mom's coworkers. The thing is, all of her coworkers were either older women or younger ladies trying to break into the industry. This guy was neither of those. I responded by saying that I didn't think I could let him in and that he should just come back later. At this point, he got really angry. He started banging on the door saying, "I know your mom. Her name is Mom's name. You need to let me in right now." When he started getting aggressive, I ran over to the cordless phone and hit the button to call the salon. When they answered, I told her who I was and told her that I needed to talk to my mom right away. I explained the situation to her and she told me to hang up, go to the laundry room and lock the door, and call the cops. She then said that she would be there in a few minutes. I did exactly what she said. I ran to the laundry room, I locked the door, and then called 911, telling them that a guy was trying to break into my house. After about 10 minutes, I heard my mom yelling my name, along with the voice of an officer. I came out to see them standing at the door and looking at a pile of glass. Apparently, after I had run down to the laundry room, this guy had smashed the window on the front door and tried to break in. The officers took my statement, asking me a bunch of questions about the guy and what he looked like. I told them all that I could, and I told them that the guy knew my mom's name specifically, and they said that they would drive around the area to try to find the guy, but I have no idea if they ever caught them. And my mom thanked them, and after all was said and done, she told me that I had done everything right and kept telling me that it was all okay. I could tell that she was freaking out about this as bad as I was. After that, I wasn't allowed to be at home alone for a few years. My mom worked with one of our neighbors, an older lady that was actually one of the lunch ladies at my school, and I stayed at her house until they got home every day until I was in high school. She was pretty cool though, and she always had food for me when I got there, so I didn't mind. That day is something that has been burned into my memory, and when I was at that age, I was definitely scared, but as I mentioned, I now realize how serious it actually was. I'm thankful that, even at that age, I was smart enough to realize that this guy didn't want anything good. I have no idea how he knew my mom's name specifically. Maybe he looked at the mail or something, but I'm just glad that I trusted my instincts, and that I was able to avoid a much worse fate. I have an experience that has been with me since I was a little kid. I'm currently 35, and this must have happened when I was 5 or 6. This was the 90s, so no phones, pre-internet times. I live in South Central Los Angeles. I've lived there my whole life and continue to do so. In fact, I still live on the same property where this happened. On this particular night, there might have been around 6 p.m. It was already dark out. My mom and dad were home, and my mom had a craving for a specific cake from Marie Callender's. She sends me and my dad to go out and get it. I remember the whole trip. Getting into my dad's minivan in the back seat, being at the store, the cake, coming home. I remember holding the bag with the cake in it. I remember wearing a pink little tank top, some little flowered shorts, and little sandals with a big daisy on the top. Now, to understand the layout of my house, particularly the backyard, let me describe it. We have always entered the house from the back part of the yard, the garage area. Between the house and the garage is a large area, it being the backyard. In the backyard, the grassed area at the time was in the form of a giant letter D, with a concrete outline which made a step. The bottom of the D being closest to the entrance of the house where we would enter. The back part of the D ran up closest to the side of the house, and the top part, the corner, aligned the end of the house where it would make a small alleyway which divided our house from our neighbor's house, separated then by a wooden fence and a gate. When we finally get home, my dad tells me to go on as he has to lock up the car. I went ahead and made my way. As I was walking to the house, I heard a little noise in the alley of the house. For some reason, I thought that there was a small animal there. Me, being an animal lover, made my way to the alley. The noise was a small rustling sound, as if someone was moving something without trying to make too much noise. Once I reached the corner of the D where the alley was, I looked into it, expecting to find a cute little kitten or something. I was met with something that has been burned into my memory forever. The alleyway was illuminated by the moon and partial streetlight. In the middle of the alley, there was a figure hunched over. My eyes adjusted to what I was looking at. It was the size of a man. It had hair covering its body, like dry, prickly hair. It wasn't facing me and was kneeled down looking at or inspecting something. Its hands were big. The light was enough for me to see its fingers. There were 3 giant claw-like fingers. I took a step back, and I guess I must have made a noise or something because it turned to me. Its face was small. I could see the texture of hair, and it looked like it had no mouth. Most of the space was taken up by its giant glowing red eyes. It looked almost alien-like. The moment that it slightly shifted its body to face me, I was able to see giant spikes coming out of its back. Like porcupine spikes, but bigger and thicker coming from the back of its head all the way down. As soon as this thing noticed me, it dropped whatever it had in its hands and leapt over the fence in one bound. I was frozen. All I could do was just stare. I got a chance to see its feet as it jumped over, and they too were giant claws. They were big in size, with 3 giant toes ending in a sharp point. At the moment that it jumped over, that's when I heard my dad making his way in. It all happened so quick. I felt like everything was in slow motion. I remember seeing all of these details in the few seconds that it happened. I never actually heard it land on the other side of the fence. I just remember it going over in one leap like a dog would and then never hearing it run off. I, on the other hand, turned around and ran to my dad. I didn't know how to explain it to him, but I kept telling him that there was something back there. He, of course, paid no attention to me, only assuring me that it was nothing. Running into the house and straight to my mom, I told her that there was something out there, some kind of monster. I'm not sure why, but my parents didn't do anything until the 100th time of me mentioning it. My dad finally grabbed the flashlight and went out. He came back about 5 minutes later and said that there was nothing there. I don't remember the rest of that particular night. I do remember going out to the alleyway in the morning. I looked around and didn't see anything. Not exactly sure what I was looking for anyway, but I guess to just go look. Fast forward to when the internet is now the thing to have and dial-up is in its prime, I decided to look up this kind of monster. Maybe I could find something or know what it was. I typed in the description and got a bunch of things that looked like it, and people were describing it as El Chupacabra, or the goat sucker in English. This was a creature that was apparently terrorizing Mexico, and other places much too far from my home, by attacking farm animals and sucking their blood. Most of what turned up on images had wings or fangs and was scaly and green. I seriously don't know what I saw that night. It took me a long time to tell people, and when I did, I was made fun of. So I kept quiet. I know there's a lot of people on here who probably got the same thing for seeing what they did, so I figured let me throw in my story of what happened and we can all relate. I think if I were to see the same thing today, I would either stay frozen like I did all those years, or try to at least get a hold of it. Somehow I would like to think that I'd be a Rambo if my childhood trauma appeared to me again. I hope you enjoyed this thing that happened to me, and if there are any questions, please, ask away. Hi, my name is Addie. English is not my first language, so please do bear with me. For introduction, this story happened in 2019. My sister and I were international students in Sydney, Australia. As we're on a tight budget, we rented a room for about 4 months. The house had 3 bedrooms, none of the rooms had locks. It had a shared toilet and shower. The first room was occupied by the brother of the owner of the house. Let's call him D. D was in his early 40s, about 5'11", brown skin, average body type. The second room was occupied by D's friend, let's call him F. F was in his early 60s. He was probably 6'1", and also average body type. Then, lastly, our room. The third room, me and my sister shared a room. It's not really a big deal since we're very close, and as I mentioned, we were on a tight budget. And we knew D as he was a friend's friend of my aunt. So, here's the story. I arrived home from work, rested for a bit, and then I go to shower. It was probably around 7-ish p.m., and since it was winter, it's pitch black outside. When you enter our shower on the right side, it has a big sliding glass window painted with white so no one can see inside, unless you open the window. Behind that window is our backyard, with table and chairs. So I went to shower and noticed that the window was slightly open, like just a little bit. I didn't give much attention as I'm thinking I can't be seen from the outside as it was a very small opening. So I finish my shower, and I just go to the kitchen to get some food. Then D comes in from the backyard with his dog. I say hi, then continue what I'm doing. A few months pass. Me and my sister were studying and working, so most of the time we're not home during the day and just using the room to sleep at night. One time my sister has her late afternoon shift, which was not her typical schedule, as she's always in early morning shifts. I left for work, and my sister is still sleeping covered with the blanket all over her body since it was winter. We have the same body type. We're both around 5 foot and petite, so sometimes you can't tell if there's someone under the blanket, or it might just be a pillow. My sister then woke up as she heard some noise happening in the room. She opens her eyes and saw some of our panties were scattered around on the floor. She thinks that I might be running late and just throwing everything on the floor, but she then saw my housemate F searching in our laundry basket, looking for something. Then she saw F sniffing our panties. She was horrified and scared as F is a big man. My sister then pretended that she didn't see anything and asked F if he was looking for a charger. F was so shocked to see that my sister was in our bed. F then said that yes, he was just looking for a charger. After a few minutes, F went back to our room and then asked my sister to not tell anyone about what happened earlier. My sister agreed as she was afraid that F might do something bad to her. She went to work and texted me about what happened. I was shocked and afraid, because I'm the one who usually gets home first. My sister then told D what happened. I didn't go inside the house without D coming home, and I was just waiting outside for him. We went inside without any conversation. He then installed a lock on our door that night. After that happened, my sister and I moved out around a week later. But before we moved out, I was folding all of our clothes, and I remembered that I still have some clothes hanging outside in the backyard. It was pitch black, but when my eyes adjusted to the dark, I then went to get our clothes. My eyes moved to the shower window as I see a very small opening. To my shock, when you're outside, even that very small opening, you can see everything happening inside that shower. That is why D was usually outside in our dark backyard, because he could see everything inside the shower without us noticing him, since it was pitch dark outside. So, I enjoy walking at night. Usually alone, but sometimes with a friend or two. When I first started doing it, I was 16 and living with my grandmother in a small apartment. It was my way of getting some space and also a little exercise. I never had anyone mess with me, probably because I'm a guy, but I've seen and heard some things on said walks that have freaked me out. I'm also going to include 2 sleepwalking stories that I think were caused by my night walks. So, on to the first event. I always walked the same route between the ages of 16 and 22. Even when I didn't live in the area, I would walk to my usual start point and continue the walk from there. It was a couple of miles down a main road, down a residential road to a park, around the park, and then up another residential road to the main road, and then back to the start point and home. The first event took place at that second residential road. Leaving the park, there's houses on your left and a very dense patch of tall trees on the right. The whole area is covered by streetlights, so you would think that it wouldn't be creepy, but I have to admit that I never felt entirely safe on that section of the walk. I would keep to the side with the houses so that if anything happened, I could knock on a door. This time, though, I had my best friend with me, and she wanted to walk the tree side. We only made it about a block from the park when all of a sudden, all of the streetlights around us shut off. The nearest light on was about 2 blocks down. I was in the middle of saying something like, "That was weird," when we heard a loud roar behind us. It sounded like something both biological and mechanical, like if you mixed a bear roaring with the sound of a train hitting its brakes. We took off running towards the streetlight that was on as fast as we could, and as we ran, we heard branches breaking behind us. It sounded like this thing was right behind us. When we finally reached the light and we both turned to see what was following us, but then all of the other streetlights turned back on all at once, and there was nothing there. My best friend never went on those walks with me again. The second event was a different kind of horror, the human kind. I had decided to stop at the park during one of my solo walks. It was in the fall and the smell of the oak trees was really nice. I walked over to the play structure and up the slide to sit, only there was a couple of teenagers up there doing what couples do, so I apologized and walked well away so they didn't think that I was spying on them. I sat on the edge of the sandbox and stared at the stars, just enjoying the smells. I heard a noise behind me and turned to see a man walking into the park brandishing a shotgun. Not knowing who he was after, I yelled for the couple to get out of there and then ran in the opposite direction, specifically back the way that I came. I stopped at the middle school, which is about 4 blocks from the park by the road. There's a gate between the school track and the park, but going to it would have had me running past the guy with the shotgun, so I hadn't gone that way. I figured I could bang on the window and catch the night janitor, but I actually got one better. A cop was looking around the school with the flashlight. He asked me if I had seen anything strange and what I was doing there in the middle of the night. I told the cop about the guy with the gun and explained that I always went on walks before bed, and he just nodded and ran towards the gate. I followed, slowly, and arrived back at the park just in time to see the gunman being put in handcuffs and pushed into a police car. I don't know what happens to the couple, but I never heard any gunshots, so I assume they're okay, though unlikely to use a public play structure for their couple time again. The last 2 stories are a personal nature. I had graduated high school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Financial aid had declined me because I didn't have any contact with my biological parents to get their tax information. So, no college. My best friend said that she was going to Job Corps, so I went with her. They put you in these dorms that were square in shape, 4 bunk rooms, 2 living rooms, and a bathroom/laundry room/shower room in the middle. I had really bad nightmares the first few weeks there, and also kept getting trapped in sleep. As in, I could not wake myself when I realized I was dreaming. One of these dreams still sticks with me. I sat up on my bunk and found myself surrounded by giant owls who were discussing if they should kill me or not. I pled for my life, but they ignored me. I ran out of the bunk and into the bathroom area where I proceeded to vomit sand into the sink. I felt it burn and scrape my throat, and could feel myself suffocating from the lack of breath. Then I felt a hand shake me and I woke up. I was in the bathroom, standing over a sink full of vomit, with a very concerned night guard telling me that I was okay and just sleepwalking. This was the first time that I had ever sleepwalked. Job Corps couldn't get the sleepwalking under control, and I also started having fainting spells that they couldn't diagnose, so I ended up having to move back home. I couldn't move in with my family, so I moved in with the brother of one of my high school friends. I resumed my nightly walks, and things were pretty good. Anytime I sleepwalked, my roommate would just gently guide me back to the bed, or to the bathroom if sleep me said I had to pee. A couple of times I walked out on guests naked, but he just explained to them that my room was the hottest in the house, and that I sleepwalked and it was fine. There was one time, though, that he didn't catch me. I had skipped my night walk this night, feeling too tired to go after a long day. I'd put a movie on my computer, stripped, and got into bed. I don't remember dreaming, but I woke up being carried out of a cop car. They handed me off to my roommate and told him that we should put a lock on the outside of my bedroom door. I had walked, naked and barefoot, all the way to the park. A security guard found me, realized I was sleepwalking from my responses, and had the cops pick me up. My roommate had gotten up to use the restroom and found the front door open, and that I was missing, so he called the police. Thankfully, they did put 2 and 2 together, brought me back, and handed me off to him. We did flip my bedroom doorknob so that the lock was on the outside, and also put a chain on it just in case sleepwalking me figured out how to use a key. Before I tell this story, I want to preface it with the fact that this is not a typical scary story where something freaky or crazy happens. Rather, it's more of a cautionary tale, and the scary part is what could have happened had things gone differently. When I was 5, my family and I moved from a suburban neighborhood to a little farmette. There were still houses around, and our neighbors were in pretty close proximity. However, we had enough land for horses, chickens, goats, etc. When we first moved in, I remember my parents getting acquainted with our neighbors, who were around their age, late 20s, early 30s. Let's call them Mr. and Ms. Nelson. They would come over a lot, and I even remember Mr. Nelson putting up a tire swing for me and my sisters. Mr. Nelson seemed like the coolest adult in the world. He would swing us really high on the swing, toss us up in the air, take us for rides on his four-wheeler. He would always joke around with us too, and we thought he was the coolest guy. At our new house, we had a big field which was a hill, and down the hill was a creek. A small lot, and then there was a fence separating our house with Mr. Nelson's. Me and my sisters would play down there a lot, and Mr. Nelson actually made us a little fort made out of old wood. He also made us a treehouse in the woods by our house, and even dug a swimming hole for us in the creek. Overall, he seemed like a great guy, and my sisters and I loved being around him, but looking back, I have a few memories that made me believe that his intentions may not have been pure. First, when my parents started getting to know our neighbors. I specifically remember my mom telling me to be careful around Mr. Nelson and to not sit on his lap. I thought this was super weird because I didn't understand why that would be a big deal. I was a kid. That's just what you did with some adults. To me, I thought my mom was saying this so that we didn't think that Mr. Nelson was our dad. Weird thought process, but I was a kid. Another memory is that Mr. Nelson would say stuff to us like, "One of these days, I'm gonna pick you guys up in the middle of the night and take you to Sonic's." He said that a lot, actually. Like, multiple times. He would also tell us that he was going to buy us a phone, give us $100, just things like that. We would excitedly tell our parents this, but they just said that he was pulling our leg. Another time, Mr. Nelson came by and took us on a ride in his Jeep. I think that we drove around the block and weren't gone for very long, but when we got back, my mom freaked out. He took us without asking my parents, and I don't even think she knew where we went. I don't remember it all, but I just remember my mom getting really upset and being very confused. I didn't know what she was so worried about. It's all kind of fuzzy, but looking back, I remember my mom never liking Mr. Nelson. I never knew why, because he was so nice. I honestly thought that she was just jealous because maybe she thought that we liked him more than we liked her. Anyways, after that, we saw less and less of him, and my parents' friendship with them kind of fizzled out. Him and my dad stayed friends, but he wasn't around us much. The last incident that I remember is one that I've always looked back on and wondered, what could have happened? My sister and I were swimming in the swimming hole, which was in direct view of his house. When he saw us out there, I think we called him over to the fence to talk. He then said that he was going to go get his swimming trunks on to come swim with us. We waited a few moments, and he came walking out the door shirtless, and when my mom rang the dinner bell. That always meant that we had to come inside, so we called to him saying that we had to go and that we could maybe swim another time, and then ran home. I always remember that because I was sad that we didn't get to swim with him. As you're reading this, alarm bells are likely going off in your head. Mine never did. Until recently when I started thinking about all of these things. I started feeling weird about it. I want to stress the fact that Mr. Nelson was around a lot, and the vast majority of my memories with him are ones where my parents were not around. I started to ask myself, what was a grown man doing hanging out with 5- and 7-year-old girls all the time? Why did he always do such nice things for us? Why was he going swimming with 2 little girls alone? And why did my mom not trust him? Why would he tell us he was going to pick us up in the middle of the night to go somewhere? I mulled over all of these things for several months, and talked to my sister about it, who also thought it was weird, but didn't have any information to offer. I think that we just decided to not think too deep into it and give him the benefit of the doubt. But I still kept thinking about it and how weird it was. Finally, I recently talked to my mom about it. I said, "Hey, I've been thinking about this a lot, but do you remember when you told me not to sit on Mr. Nelson's lap and that we should be careful about him?" Immediately after saying this, she got this disgusted look on her face. She said that she got weird vibes from him from the start and didn't like the way that he acted around us. She said that he seemed creepy, thought that he didn't have pure intentions, and that he always came sniffing around. I guess he would come to the house when no one was home, and stuff like that. She told me that he was even a little inappropriate with her at one point. I guess she had called him about doing a potential project at the house. He was in construction, and I guess they talked about that. The second time that she called, he answered the phone in a sensual way. She didn't go into detail, but she implied that it was in a way that you would answer someone that you're trying to start something with. Gross. Basically, she didn't trust him around us, and she felt very wary about us spending time with him. After she shared that with me, I told her about all of the stuff that he said to us, about picking us up in the middle of the night, and the swimming situation. She said she doesn't remember us telling her that, but that if she did, she would have freaked out. Basically, the conversation I had with her confirmed my suspicions about his character. I think it's safe to say he was probably grooming us and working up to potentially doing something harmful. It makes me sick to think about all the time we spent alone with him, far out of view of our parents. I also wonder if he intentionally dug a deeper hole into the creek so that we would spend more time there. There were many times when my sister and I would go out there in our bathing suits just to swim in the hole. He most likely was able to see us from inside his house. I know that this is kind of anticlimactic, but I hope that it serves as a warning to parents or anyone out there. This man was married, has a job, had kids now, and regularly went to church. On the surface, he seemed very normal and kind, but I think he secretly was a creep who wanted to prey on younger girls. I was lucky to have had nothing happen to me, but many are not as fortunate. If you take anything from this experience, go with your gut and be careful who you let into your life. Oftentimes, predators don't lurk around in dark corners wearing trench coats. They could be your friends, neighbors, coworkers, family members, etc. I honestly hope that maybe this is all just a misinterpretation and that he really was just a friendly neighbor, but something tells me to not hold my breath. This is something that happened to me a long time ago, when I was a freshman at college. But it was like no other college. Though I suppose there were plenty of other esoteric places then. It was 1980, exactly. The college was barely accredited. It would sometimes lose standing and be called institute instead of college, making it all the more impossible to grasp. It had started in the 1960s, with hippie/CIA roots. It was a world college, a world institute, and the headquarters were on an old estate gracing the northern harbor. Years later, I would learn that the money which built the main house, the show barn up the road, the servants' quarters, it all came from a fortune hunter who struck it rich under the employ of the East India Trading Company. He had offices in Hong Kong, but later came to settle on the eastern seaboard. The family was eccentric, and they donated an austere quasi-religion who, in turn, gave it to a corporate visionary who made it his Disneyland. This institute of frugality and utopian idealism. It became filled, for a time, with bearded, bespectacled men, and passionate in their beliefs and discussions as they talked about world events in the beautiful but rotting chambers of the main house. A mansion full of original French doors and moved-in 1970s office environs. Women in scarves and overalls going through files, the odd man in the suit, clean-shaven on the new push-button phone. When I came there, though, it was as if it were Brigadoon itself, existent only in the mist. I took a limo from the airport, and the man driving had never heard of the place, but as I gave him directions, we found our way to a dirt road with a small sign only noting the lane name. There was no signage of the college. Going downhill in what was now forest, there was one sign that was a yellow yield sign with 3 handwritten words upon it, animals at play. And suddenly it was as if time itself was different. I was sent to live in Dawn House, a house that was on the bottom part of the campus, or the main campus as it was known. It was across the giant dirt circular driveway for the main house, with a gargantuan tree in the center that every class would climb for a group pic, with the swinging daring ones at the top. Dawn House was a single-story place that was unusual because of its paint job. It was bright orange with black trim, like Halloween, and it stuck out from the graceful aging estate with its algae-clumped ponds and crumbling formal gardens. It also sported a wreath on the front door, plastic, hung over a picture of some naked hippies in a semi-formal pose. It was a weird look, aberrant, in this otherwise bucolic place. I would learn soon enough who was responsible for the paint. My housefather, V. He wore the same black pants and bright orange turtlenecks. Had jet black hair slicked back like the 1950s. At the end of his maintenance day, he would sit in a ragged, overstuffed chair, eat his mono-diet meal of elbow noodles with one solid can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup stirred in. He paid for that. He went to the hospital, and that is what they told him was wrong. So never go on that mono-diet. And from that chair, he would watch this big TV far away at the other end of the room. It was furnished with a couple of dusty couches, a few cheap end tables, and a payphone. Sometimes a glowy orb made of plastic with colored lights inside would appear on the coffee table, a creation of V's. Mainly, it was idyllic there. We would sit in comfy places and listen to lectures about Pol Pot, or whoever they chose that day. There was this guy who had unruly hair, and he asked me to weave chopsticks into it, and it was very meditative. Students were from all over the globe. They were laughing because no one could really understand each other or the lecturers who were also from all over. There was one student there who was different from the rest. Instead of falling into the good feels, he was breaking into the main house at night and reading old and new student files. Some had lost their minds in third world huts overseas, overcome with malaria, madness. There was one student in our class who thought they were an alien from space. He invited me to go with him one night. I didn't want to, but it seemed more fun than watching V watch TV. His favorites. Prison flicks. Old, black and white prison flicks. I had no idea that there were so many, or that they were even a thing. I think I only saw Cool Hand Luke and Papillion, but these were more prison-like than those. It was weird that he got into those movies, late at night with his TV guide to search for them, but I was scared of old, dark, creepy mansions at night. I knew how unpleasant it would be, rummaging around that creaky place with its shadowy corridors, long, narrow halls. He had a couple of flashlights that were not super great, and we headed down to the old main house. We only stayed on the first floor. There were executive offices upstairs, but I got too scared on the third step up, so we went to the lower admin and records area where he had been before, but in no way had exhausted. Soon, the old metal filing cabinets were creaking open. I found a drawer that had been part of the original house. It was built in. probably for silver in the old dining room. It had manila folders, and I held the flashlight and began to go through them. It didn't take very long to find something so startling that I just gasped and begged for Jeff to come over. He saw it in an instant. This beginning to yellow newspaper clipping, but from some sort of private paper. Like a journal of professionals type of paper. We couldn't see where it was from. There was a photograph as well. I think it went with the article. It was of several men walking in business suits and hats, older, almost from another era, but they could be from now. Conservative dress, and the heading was something about an experiment. They were going to take an axe murderer out of prison and put him into society without society knowing what he had done. It was part of their reform theory. His base? Where did they put him? Yeah, at the Institute. Who was it? You guessed it, V. I felt sick. I was only 18, a new freshman in a new state in an already surreal environment, but this? I was shaking. We got out of there not before looking down into the basement and switching on a light to a high-backed psycho-style wheelchair, and even that could not rattle us the way that we were rattled. We walked for miles to an all-night diner. We were too creeped out to even be on campus. The walk was so long that we had to laugh. I think the sun was beginning to rise by the time that we ordered food and listened to Sugar Sugar on the little jukeboxes. I later moved to Upper Campus, an old military installation with a dome put on top by a nudist doctor who lived there, in a glass dome of plants up on the roof. And then, I was gone, traveling, not to be back there for years. But I did go to visit the campus. I'd been living in New York and it was hot. Summer came with no spring, and I grabbed a friend and we hopped a train to that rather magical place. When I came to see Old Dawn House, it was painted a modest white, and as we appeared, so did a couple from inside. School was on break, but they stayed as parents of the house. I told them that I lived there when it was orange and black. The woman opened her mouth wide, and then they both began to talk at once. V. Oh, the scandal. V had gotten grants for free camera equipment and video equipment when he came. He was to flourish in his hobbies. But there was nothing wholesome about his media grab worth around $30,000 or more. He had set up the house as his own Peeping Tom film studio, with small holes that no one ever noticed, especially in the bedrooms and the bath. It's so chilling now to think of those afternoons when I thought I saw something and would turn and there would be nothing there but the tree. But I know now that he was spying. The secret experiment murderer sprung from prison by reform theorists after chopping someone to bits with an axe had made me, us, or whoever was in Dawn House, his experiment. Hello, everybody. My name is John. I'm a 17-year-old high school student with short brown hair and brown eyes. My sister Kathy, who everybody calls Kat, is a year younger than I am with long blonde hair and blue eyes. Anyway, Halloween time a few years ago, I was watching television late at night when I heard a knock on my bedroom door. It was my sister, Kat, who had wanted to come into my room and talked to me about something important. I told her the door was open and that she could come inside. When she did, I noticed that she had a worried look on her pretty face. She told me to turn off the TV because she wanted to talk to me in private, with my bedroom door closed. I agreed to this as I quickly turned off my TV and joined her on my bed. I sat next to my sister and she began to talk. She told me that she went to a diner for burgers and fries with her girlfriend, Jody. Afterwards, the girls grabbed flashlights from Jody's car and wanted to check the cemetery out, since there was a full moon and the place was very spooky at night. Kat continued that further off in the cemetery, in the deep woods, there was a coffin just sitting there. The girls were curious, so Kat decided to open the coffin door up to see if it was empty or not. But when she did, her friend tried not to scream on what they saw inside. Kat said that it looked like Nosferatu, or Count Orlok the vampire that Max Schreck played in the 1922 silent movie classic, Nosferatu. Kat told me what I already knew, that the vampire was very ugly with a bald head, long sharp teeth, and long claws. Its eyes were closed, and arms were crossed around its stomach. She said that she immediately closed the door as she and her friend Jody exited the cemetery. It was near closing time anyways, and the girls knew that they shouldn't be in there any longer. So the two girls got back in Jody's car and headed home. Kat said that she had to tell me this fantastic story that nobody would believe. It was hard to believe. I told her that she probably saw a very old man inside the coffin, and that it wasn't Count Orlok. I mentioned that if it was really Nosferatu, then all of humankind may be wiped out. My sister then looked at me with her worried face and just looked down and nodded as I hugged her. I then told her that she should go to bed since it was a school night, and just dismiss this Nosferatu stuff. She nodded, I kissed her on the forehead and said goodnight. A few days later, Kat came into my bedroom once more and told me that day, she and her friend Jody were walking to the store, and they saw a very thin man wearing a black overcoat and a big black fedora hat on his head. The man was very pale, and the girls instantly recognized him as Nosferatu the vampire. It was particularly frightening because it was daylight out, and typically vampires just come out at night to suck people's or animals' blood. Kat went on to say that the girls were really scared now. So, that night, they went back to the cemetery. This time Kat wore her gold cross around her neck, and Jody had a stake and a hammer to kill the vampire, if he was still inside the coffin. But, she said when they approached where the coffin used to be, it was not there anymore. There was just a big old-fashioned truck with 10 or more coffins in the back, and the driver starting the truck was ready to leave. My sister and her friend Jody tried to tell the driver what one of the coffins in the back probably contained, but the truck driver just laughed it off and ordered the two girls out of the cemetery before he went and got the guards to escort them out forcefully. My sister and her pal had no choice but to leave the cemetery, mad that they didn't have a chance to kill the vampire if he was still in there. I thought that this story was far-fetched, and I told my sister so. I told her what I thought, that it was probably just an old man, and she mistook him for Count Orlok. But I also know that my sister loves me, and she would never lie to me. And it did have me thinking about what she and her friend did see. Could it possibly have been the Prince of Darkness? Whatever my sister and my friend saw, hopefully it does not come back to haunt them, or us, or we'll all be in trouble. If what she said was actually real. When I was younger, I was anemic and would often faint. This lasted about roughly 4 years. The funny thing is that every time I would faint, a yellow haze would tint my vision as I would try to tell a friend that I was about to faint. But it would always sound like, "I'm about to and I would drop. I never felt hitting the floor or ground. I would just wake up and be in a whole new situation with a different group of friends, having a good time. Yet, after a few minutes, I would ask, wait, how did I get here? and immediately my friends would give me an odd look and I would wake up from my fainting spell really confused. This has happened to me every single time I have fainted. Every single time. As the years progressed, my fainting spells stopped. I've asked other people what happens to them when they faint, and all of them just respond with, just darkness. I just want to find someone else that may have experienced the same thing, or knows of someone who has, because I can't be the only odd duck. Hello, friends. How are you doing today? It is the first video of May somehow. That's incorrect. It's the first non-glitch video of May somehow. Somehow we're already in the month of May. Somebody please tell me how the hell that happened. It was February yesterday, I swear. Just like a week ago, the year started. I swear it was just a month ago that I put together a Christmas and New Year's Eve story video. But yet here we are, in May. Oh my. Anyways, this was a collection of stories from you. That's right. Yeah, I know you may be saying, hey Raven, how about you quit renaming this collection of stories? It's so hard to figure out a good name for it. But I think this is what it is now. Not just true scary stories from Reddit or true scary stories from subscribers. It's true scary stories from you. I think that works. Maybe you don't. If you don't, just say, yo, dummy, that don't work. I'm still going to do it, though. So, anyways, friends, hopefully you enjoyed this collection of video. Thank you to every single one of you for sending your stories my way. You all are amazing. This was a fun collection of stories. Definitely some creepy things in there, so hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. We're so close to hitting 19K and then so close to 20K. We're going to get there soon, I promise. It's amazing, and I'm psyched for it, so yeah. You can also join memberships or Patreon, get early access, stuff like that. Get super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. Never ever expected, always appreciated. And yeah, you can also leave me a comment down below, letting me know how you're doing, how's it going, how life's treating you right now. Hopefully well. If not, feel free to vent. I'll give you a response. May not be a fully detailed response because I don't like to push myself into people's situations and give them advice, but I will listen. Always listening, so. Anyways, friends, I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I hope I do see you again here very soon. But until then, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my friends, much love, and sleep well.